Welcome to Don't Involve Me. This is your host, Jake Sherbing, and if this is your first time listening to this podcast, I just want to say thank you for giving this channel a shot. In this episode, we're interviewing Brandon John. He's a local artist in the Minnesota area. He is going to be talking about his new comic coming out called Nut Number 2. That comes out April 5th. All right, just a fair warning for this podcast, or for this episode specifically. The audio is a little rough around the edges. We're still trying to figure out what's the best way to do this remotely, what our guests need to have solid audio. So in this one, you'll be hearing a little bit of radio background noise. If you guys are okay with it, please check out the episode. Brandon John is a great interview. He has some great insights when it comes to comic books, when it comes to artists, and he talks in great detail about Nut Number 2 and his journey of being an artist. So please check it out. And yeah, let's cue the music. Welcome to Don't Evolve Me, the place like Ash catching Pikachu. We don't evolve, we just level up. And here I have a special guest, Brandon. How are you, sir?
I am great. I've never been on a podcast, so I'm very excited.
First time?
Yes, sir.
I'm your first. Sweet. Taking that podcast virginity. One by one.
Oh boy. I'm glad it's you, Jake.
Me too. I'm glad. How are you?
I'm doing great. I just moved to a new city. I live in St. Paul now, and I've been here for about a month, and I'm just getting used to the area, getting used to my new job, and things are going great.
Nice. What do you do now?
Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking on the pod.
Oh yeah, not a problem. I'm a substitute for it's called SCPCA. It's a St. Paul public art school. So all the students
cool.
there, grades 9 through 12, are artists in one way or another. So I'll sub for art classes or academic classes, and it's a really flexible schedule. And I just talk to students and draw all day. Really, it's ideal.
That sounds awesome. That's cool. I didn't know that you were in the teaching.
Me neither. It just kind of happened. I feel like I skipped a couple steps, honestly, because I'm like, what am I doing here? But it's really fun. It's fun to talk to them, and I just get to work on my comics all day, and they love it because they're working on their own comics too.
Nice. Do you do the substitute teacher name thing where you just mess up their names on purpose? Please tell me you did at least once.
I don't know anybody's name, man. It's ridiculous. I mean, at the comic book store, I was horrible with names, but this is become inflamed because there's so many people.
I feel like it's
hey, you, nice to see you again.
I feel like it's even worse. I worked with kids, and sometimes I remember Valentine's Day. I was helping with this kid. I was helping them put names on the Valentine's Day cards, and just help them with that process the day before Valentine's Day. And I saw the class list, and the names are very not the typical white old names that you're used to.
Sure.
And so
no
just
Bobs or Jims.
No Bobs or Jims. There's maybe out of the 20 kids in the class, there's maybe 5 I would say normal-ish names, and there's names I have no idea how to pronounce this.
Yeah, well, and at the school where I'm subbing, there's such a high trans population that a lot of the people whose names that are listed on the roster are their dead names. So you're supposed to go by last name, which I usually forget anyway. But even if you do remember the first name you see on the roster, you don't necessarily want to use it to respect that student. So usually I just end up using things like y'all or captain or boss. Get away with it.
Nice. Hey, you person, captain, boss. I like it. It's smart. All right. Well, tell my audience a little bit about you. Outside of your substitute teacher.
Yeah. Well, I'm a cartoonist and painter, and a co-owner of Row 7 Publishing. My girlfriend and I own the publishing company together, so I'll self-publish my own comics through it, and then she'll self-publish her poetry books through it, and I paint the covers, and just the interiors are traditional black and white comic. I don't typically work digitally.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I actually just graduated from St. Cloud State, where they were very supportive and helped me out with with the comics and the painting end of things, and I'm eager and sad to be out of it at the same time because it's like I have way more time now, but it's kind of like working in a vacuum a little bit.
Yeah. After having all that support, now you're kind of like a little bird on your own, flying away from the
Basically.
nest.
Yeah, I'm like, I was finishing up Nut 2 and I'm like, man, is anybody even like seeing this? Like, what am I doing?
Welcome to the adult world where you do things on your own.
I don't like it. It's scary.
A little bit. All right,
Yeah.
before we get into Nut 2, which I'm really excited to talk about,
Yeah.
I did just open up Nut 1 to refresh
Oh
my
boy.
memory a little bit. It's
That one is interesting.
It is very interesting. I want to have you talk about it. So, before we get into it, I like to do this thing called Show Me Your Socks. Do you have any nerdy
Yes.
socks on you?
Oh man, my wardrobe is pretty depressing.
Are you just simply black right now? Black or white
sort
socks?
of. I'm wearing just white socks. But I redid my wardrobe recently because I used to wear a lot of like graphic tees, superhero shirts in particular.
Nice.
But I got kind of sick of like advertising for things, so I just bought a lot of blank clothes. So now I'm like, I'll wear blue today, which it makes my life simpler, but is really boring on the outside.
I feel like that's how getting older works. You kind of start off with like all these like the interests, everything you like, and then you slowly just get more boring and more minimalist as you
Sure.
get older.
Well, and maybe it's something too with like, as you get older, you just have to make more and more decisions, and
Yeah.
maybe I've reached a decision fatigue where I don't want to like figure out what I'm wearing the next day. I just want to like have it over and done with.
Do I want Superman, Batman? Do I want this shirt company? You know what? F it. I'm just going to do colors. I'm feeling
Honestly.
a little blue. I'm feeling a little red. Actually, I'm just feeling brown, tan. Yeah.
See,
I
it
get
makes
that.
sense. I knew a girl from school when I was going to college. She bought like 5 of the exact same outfit and would wear that for years. I never
Huh.
saw her wear anything different. I thought it was genius.
Maybe she's just part of a cartoon show, and we're just
It was
living
like
in her world.
I swear, it was like a Timmy Turner thing.
Or like a recess, they all just wear the same clothes, and they just don't want to animate anything else.
Oh man, it worked. It was a great outfit, and I never got sick of it. I'm like, wow, she's got it figured out.
Do you do that with your characters? Do you have them just wear the same thing, or do you have them switch clothes?
Yes and no. Like, I think with comics, particularly in like the confines of a single issue, it's not always the smartest idea to have them change outfit because
Yeah.
it can make the reader a little bit confused. But with Nut 2, I actually do have them change outfit for a little bit, and it's such a
Okay.
change that I think I feel like it's not as much of a disconnect there.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, I
Yeah.
gotta talk about my wares. I'm wearing. You can see it. Audience can't. I'm wearing a Captain America sweatshirt.
Yep,
It's
I
literally
saw
the
that.
only.
That's cool.
It's the only sweatshirt that I had that wasn't dirty. So I didn't pay dirty.
There you go.
Show
It's
me
the
your wear.
adamantium, doesn't rust.
Show me your wares. I just did a Shazam Demi this morning. I've been busy this morning, Brandon. I've been up since 4.
Damn.
Not because I wanted to. It's just how my body works. I got
man.
some DC pops. So I got Green Arrow, Arrow
Ooh.
version of Green Arrow. Got this weird version of John Stewart, and then Kid Flash.
Ooh, I like the Kid Flash one a lot.
Yeah, it's one
I've
of my
always
favorite
thought
ones.
his outfit's super cool.
It is pretty cool. All right.
Yeah, they did something genius with that design where they left his like hair unexposed, so
Yeah.
you could like see the speed in the panels a lot easier than you could with like Flash, who's like completely covered up.
Yeah, where Flash kind of looks like a swimmer in a way, whereas
Exactly.
Wally West is like, oh, he is going fast. Look at his hair.
Yeah, I mean it makes more sense. Like you wouldn't want your hair whipping around your face if you were running, but like I don't know, it
Probably
looks
not.
cooler.
Yeah, Wally West. That makes wait. So Wally West, let me get this straight, is the fastest Flash, but he doesn't have like that. What's it called? Like the speed velocity. Like he doesn't have the windbreaker. So he's the fastest
Yeah.
Flash without the windbreaker.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not like the Flash expert, but I've always understood it as he's the fastest Flash, and I thought it worked with both of them, where it was like as they ran, there was like this field that was created around them where like the friction wouldn't like destroy them, because like they run carrying people, and logically
Yeah.
those people would like be torn apart based
Yeah.
on the speed. But I don't know. You gotta
Yeah.
suspend your disbelief with this stuff sometimes.
You can't think too heavily about it.
No,
That's
then you can pick anything apart.
I was doing my Shazam review, and I'm like, just don't think about this movie, and you'll enjoy it. If you don't think about it, you will enjoy it. If you think about it, it's going to destroy. It's horrible.
Yep.
Nothing makes
Exactly.
sense.
Just appreciate the flashing colors. You'll have a better time.
Pretty lights. It is a very gorgeous movie. I will say this. There's a lot
Is
of
it?
like, yeah, because they do a lot of the scenes during the day where, most superheroes, it seems like they're doing this dark in the background. So it's just
Yeah.
nice to see Shazam in a really bright outfit outside, and like, oh, it looks cool.
Yeah, well, there's this fad, and I hope it's going away because there's been complaints about it. But like, particularly with streaming TV shows, there's just like entire episodes where it's almost pitch black, and I'm
Yeah.
like, like with Last of Us, I'm like, I guarantee that in your movie theater that you rented out to like screen test this, you could see
Mhm.
that. But me, as an average person with an average TV, I have no idea what's happening.
You have complaints about The Last of Us, about
I love
the
the
lighting.
show. Um, the lighting is better than Obi Wan. There were episodes in Obi Wan where I was like,
Yeah.
I literally have no idea what's happening.
Oh, so I've been reviewing Last of Us. I don't know if you've been
Oh,
listening
cool.
or not. Um, what are your thoughts on Last of Us?
I like it. I never played the game, but I watched my dad play the game,
Okay.
and it seems to be following it very closely. But I mean, the game was so beautifully written. I'm not disappointed with that at all. I mean, it's just a good story, and I think I don't particularly enjoy zombie stuff a lot of the time, but this
Yeah.
is very different, and it seems to be more about the people than it
Yep.
does like the actual like infected people. Kind of like Night of the Living Dead. I recently saw that movie, and that was a similar thing where it was like you, the zombies weren't hardly part of it most of the time.
Yeah.
It was about the people they were stuck with.
The zombies kind of just put people in position to essentially explore the. It puts them in a position where it explores relationships in a different light. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
puts
And
them in
like,
traumatic experiences that like pushes people into more darker areas than normal life.
yeah, exactly. And like, zombies are like animalistic and scary in that way, but you always know what to expect from them. Whereas I think the people are a lot scarier because you don't quite know, like they have motivations and you don't know what those are all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
What would you? Okay, so I have a rating scale for my show, and I'll just briefly explain it to you because I want to know how you would rate this show. I'm really into this show, so I'm curious.
okay,
Since you never played the game, I'm curious what you would give it as a rating. So I have like a rating system 1 out of 5, which is 1 is trash, 2 is meh, 3 is good, 4 is great, and 5 is like the best of its genre. It's like top level. And then I do plus
okay,
and minus where if you're on the fence, let's say if like you thought it was like a good TV show, but you're like it might be great, you give it like a 3 plus.
sure. That's hard. I mean, I love the director a lot. Like I don't know if you ever saw Chernobyl, but I
Yeah,
think this guy he's like
Chernobyl's
a
great.
master. Yeah, I think this guy's like a master at anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I feel like with the show, it kind of loses it sometimes. Like when it loses it, it's always important. Like I have 2 episodes left still, but I just
Oh,
finished.
you haven't finished it?
No, I just
Oh, okay.
finished the one where Ellie was sort of like hanging out with her girlfriend, and it was a flashback. And I felt that that was really important, but it sort of lost the momentum of what was happening with Joel in my mind. So I
Yeah.
think that that's sort of my main issue with the show, and I would say I'd give it a 4, like a
Okay.
3 plus or a 4, because just and it's hard not to compare it to Chernobyl, but comparing it to Chernobyl, if that's a 5, then I would say that this is a 3 plus or a 4 in my
Okay.
mind.
You still got 2 episodes left, which is
I do.
arguably the most important episodes.
Yeah, I'm sure. It seems like there's a little bit of a lull in the story where I am right now. If you had asked me after episode 1 or 2, I would probably say that this was a 4 plus at least.
Okay.
Um,
I
but
gave it a 4
might
plus
change.
in general.
Okay.
I would say the last 2 episodes definitely are important before rating it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll have to let you know after. I think I know what happens just based on knowing the game, but we'll see if it changes.
It's pretty. I don't want to spoil anything. I'll just leave it. All right. So, what are you? All right. Moving on. What are you nerding out to now? What have you been nerding out to lately?
You know, it's weird. I'm getting really into like I'm trying to find a better way to describe it, but it's sort of like 19 like early 1900s to 1950s like ephemera, if that makes sense. So like pulp cover illustrations, ads, things like that, cuz
Yeah.
there was like series of like pulp magazines that they would do, or like pulp books that they would do, that would have these beautifully painted covers
Mm-hmm.
of like characters that don't even make any sense, which I think is really interesting. Like, for example, there'll be like a floating guy with a suit that's being like overtaken by this enormous green hand, and it'll like have this caption that says like Dr.
Hmm.
Psycho against the nightmare hand. And it's like like what does that even mean? And it's less about the story inside and more about like seeing that image in the caption and how the viewer can extrapolate their own conclusions, if that makes sense. And I'm really into that
Yeah.
relationship.
I'm looking it up now because I want to see it.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to. I probably
Not specifically
have
that
that.
one, just in general.
Oh, okay. I I where I live now is a little bit dangerous in that I live right across from Half Price Books, which is one of the coolest bookstores ever.
Okay.
And it is very hard not to go in there on like a somewhat daily basis.
Yeah.
Like I
So
have
are
to
you?
leave my wallet at home.
Are you? So are you drawing these, or are you just looking at them? Like, what are you doing
Both.
with these covers?
I have like art book collections of these
Okay.
covers, or I have the physical covers, and sort of before I start working or warming up, I'll start flipping through these things and just like, because I think that art is a little bit of a feedback loop. It's like the things that you're absorbing and then creating that becomes absorbed by other people. So I'm just trying to sort of like stimulate that feedback loop and see these things to come up with my own characters. So like if you
Nice.
saw on Instagram, I did that story, the 2-page story with the Doomlings and the TV guy that had the TV head. Like he was a character that was based on like a pulp cover that I had seen, that I made up
Okay.
my own story for.
I don't think I came across it. I am looking it up now. I should have just looked up all of your whole page before even having you on. That's on me.
No worries, I can probably find it someplace too. I have stacks of stuff. I
There's a lot
think,
of Nut too, which is awesome. Wait, so
yes.
I just looked at your cover. The "Are you listening?" I said no pickles. I like that.
Oh yeah, that's actually that was a promotion, or not promotional poster. That's a special poster that you get from Kickstarter. It's like a certain level that you can buy into. The Doomling thing is like right next to that picture of me holding Nut One at a library, and it's not too far down. Like you really only have to swipe once or twice.
Right next to it, the Doomling.
Yeah, so like there's the picture of me holding the book, and then there's the picture of me with all the pages spread out, and then right next to that, with the 2 pages, like between that and then the
Oh, I
guy
see
with the
it.
robe.
Okay.
Yeah, and
No,
then page
I
one
did
is
see this
before
one.
page two.
Yep. Nice. That was good.
Thank you.
You,
Yeah,
I mean, the audience can't see it.
they're here.
Well,
They're here in spirit. They can imagine.
nice. Well, that's really cool. That's a really cool thing to nerd out on. I have nothing like that. I've just been playing Last of Us Part Two. That's all I got.
Well, that's a cool thing. Like how, like there's the early 1900s ephemera, but that at that time, that's like how video games and pop culture is now. It's like the same thing. It's just
Yeah.
different points in time. So you're
Nice.
more in touch with humanity than I am. You're actually
That
like participating.
I'm participating in the culture. Well, hey, it's my job now to participate in the culture. I need to
That's
be caught
true.
up with these things. But you're going
Yeah.
back in time, exploring these cool covers.
Oh boy.
I'm excited to see more. Are you planning
Yeah,
on
thank
doing
you.
like your own cover to kind of
Um,
tribute?
yeah, well, what I'm trying to do with the nut covers is I'm trying to make them so that they could look like they come from that time, but
Yeah.
are still a little bit modern in the same sense. I haven't quite mastered it because there's like this grainy quality that they get because they were produced so cheaply, and
Mm.
it's like you can't really print comics on newsprint anymore because it's actually more expensive. Funny enough.
Oh, really?
Um, yeah, because it's like they're just not set up for it
Oh, that
anymore,
makes
so they
sense.
have to
Yeah.
do special printing for that particular paper. So now what I'm doing with the Nut 3 cover is I bought from Half Price Books a St. Catherine's University 1961 yearbook that I ripped
Hmm.
the cover off of, and I'll use the portraits inside to draw from, like just as practice, but I'm going to paint on the cover because it has that sort of grainy quality to try
Nice.
and capture some of that when I scan it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's cool. All
Yeah,
right, let's.
it's reached an obsessive level of thought.
Ah, I get that. I've been there. All right, let's move on. We're gonna do news quickie. So,
Yes.
all right, for the first news, are you in the Magic, Brandon? Have you ever played Magic at all?
Oh yeah, I used to be way more into it, but then I got sick of trying to find friends to play it with and buying cards.
Mine was the latter. My deck got cycled out for standard, and I was like, I'm
Oh,
done. I just spent $200 on this deck. It's no longer usable. F that. I'm not doing that anymore.
you
So,
just got to do like casual games with friends where you can use the legal cards.
exactly. I just use my old deck. I'm like, I don't care. It's not standard.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna use the
that's the
deck that I
most
paid
fun,
$200
I think.
for. All right. So Magic news. Have you ever heard of the Black Lotus card?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
The first edition sold for $540,000. The most, I believe, it's the most that has ever been
Damn,
sold.
that's crazy. Man, well, and I don't know if you heard either, but they're doing like a Lord of the Rings set,
Yep.
and
The One
they're
Ring to rule
doing
them all.
yeah, they're doing the One Ring, but there's like I don't know if it's that there's just one of them or if it's such a low print run, but that's kind of crazy. They're saying that that might be worth a ton of money too.
Yeah, I can imagine it. I feel like these
Yeah,
companies really could just make a bunch of money by just running like famous pop culture cards.
yeah, I think that's a really fun idea. I'm rubbed the wrong way about making things that are falsely collectible, like
Yeah.
variant covers, which is ironic for me to say because I do the same thing. But like, it just clearly seems like they're trying to rip people off with this thing because like Black
Oh.
Lotus is old and it had a low print run because the company was old.
Yeah.
But this is like only the rich will be able to get this thing.
It's like when Eminem did a cover with Spider-Man,
Yeah, it's the same
and
thing.
there's like 5,000 copies, and it sold out immediately, and they immediately was like, "Hey, it's I forget how much it cost. It was like $500 or something like that."
I
So I tried
think
getting one
yeah,
when I saw it, and then I don't know if you remember the price on it. I think I talked to
I
you or
do.
Jay about it.
I think on his website they were charging something. I think it was at least 50, which doesn't sound like a ton, but maybe it was that once when they ran out, people were reselling it for a lot more, which would make
Yeah.
sense. But no, I was working at the store when that was happening, and I remember that. I don't know if anybody ever told you, but the thing that happened with my coworker was hilarious because we were telling him it's like Eminem Spider-Man cover, and he
Yep.
kept looking up M&M's,
Oh, I heard
like
this.
the candy, and it's like he doesn't admit that that ever happened, but it's like, no, dude, we were
I know.
there.
I know. He told me about it. He did told me. I think I
Did
might
he?
have been there for the conversation. I
He's like,
remember
oh, I
that.
know who Eminem is. I was just confused. Like, all right, whatever.
Well, it makes more
Sure.
sense that Eminem's the company would be sponsoring a Spider-Man cover than Eminem the rapper.
Yeah, I know. It seems like kind of an afterthought. Like, I always knew he was into Spider-Man, but it seems really random at
He
this
just
point
loves
to do that.
he just loves comics in general. But yeah, it's like an old
Yeah,
issue too. So like, hey, we're gonna resell this old issue with I'm gonna be drawn on it. Which I mean,
yeah,
hey, if I was famous too, I would want I in general just would love
yeah.
to be on the cover of Spider-Man.
Why not? That'd be cool. You could always have somebody do a sketch cover, draw
Yeah.
you a Spider-Man.
Maybe I'll who is it? Patrick Gleason. I met him because he
Mm-hmm.
did Spider-Man cover for a while. I should have convinced him to just like, hey, can I just like be in the background? I have gray
Yeah,
beard. It's really cool looking.
Yeah, he'd be a good person to do that with. And if you ever like, you said you got a sketch cover from him before.
No,
That was Spider-Man.
I I don't know if he's still doing Spider-Man covers, but this was like 2 years ago. For the audience who doesn't know, Patrick Gleason is a Minnesota-based artist who does. The last time I checked, he does a lot of Spider-Man work for Marvel. I think he's moved on because I think there's another artist who does Spider-Man now.
Yeah, what's it?
They,
Ramita Jr. I think is doing it now.
yeah. So at the time, I actually have it on the wall. Where is it? Yep, you can see it right where my head is. That little Spider-Man cover on top. That was Patrick Gleason. He was drawing that at the comic book convention when I saw it, and I asked him what issue it was, and I made sure I got that specific comic.
That's cool. That's a good story.
All right, so moving on, because this news quickie is becoming a little more intimate and longer. That's what the segment is called, a news quickie.
It wouldn't be losing my podcast virginity without intimacy.
That's a good way to look at it. All right, news number two. Tom Cruise loves the Flash movie. He saw it ahead of time, and he absolutely loves it. So there's hope yet for Flash.
Heck yeah. You know, it's funny. I actually, it's a weird coincidence, but like a week ago, I had a nightmare about, what's his face? From Ezra Miller. About Ezra Miller, and that I was at his house, and then he freaked me out, and I tried escaping, and he was mad that I left. So that, like, as I was on my way home, he was like, and in this universe I could drive, but in real life I don't drive. But I was driving home, and I could see him like running like the Flash next to me, and he like flicked me off. And then I get home, and he's already there, and he like framed me for car theft. So I for that reason, I don't know how I feel about this movie.
You had Ezra Miller chasing you. That is a nightmare. That is.
I don't know why. Like, he's not a person I think about, like, ever. I knew he was kind of a freak, but like.
You probably heard of one of his stories. I don't know how he's in this movie. I don't know how he's not canceled. This movie's just not canceled. But Tom Cruise loves it. Apparently, he saw the movie ahead of time, an advanced screening, and then reportedly went after the director because he loved it so much. He wants to work with. I don't know if he wants to work with the director, but he like went out of his way to give the director props. So maybe there's hope yet. I don't know if Tom Cruise knows what a good movie is. I mean, he's in a lot of good movies. I don't know.
Yeah, you know, my running theory is that Ezra Miller, in his weirdness, attracted the attention of the Scientology people, and they're like trying to recruit him. And this is Tom Cruise's like attempt at recruiting.
Oh God, Ezra Miller's been going in the closet, isn't he?
You know, I wouldn't doubt it. Like, it all makes more sense when you think of it that way.
Ezra Miller does seem like somebody who would be in Scientology. I will say that. He does seem like he was. Alright, last little bit of news. I want to do some comic book news. Apparently, a Teen Titan will die in June. One of the Core 5 or Donna Troy.
Yeah, I mean, you know, characters die. That never happens.
Then they'll come back. I don't know. I mean, I'm just assuming Donna Troy's going to die because it's the only one I can see them just like, no one cares about Donna Troy, but it makes for a great story.
Most people don't even know who Donna Troy is anymore. Yeah, like, I mean, I barely know who she is. I think she kind of lived and died in the 80s.
Yeah, she died in Titans.
Oh, did you?
Have you watched that show at all?
I saw the first season. I wasn't super into it.
It's trash.
Yeah,
it's a one.
That's what I got.
I watched the first two. Donna Troy dies in the second one because she catches an electric pole and electrocutes herself to death.
Yeah.
And it was literally like the last scene of the season. I'm just like, what?
What a way to go as a Teen Titan. Kind of anticlimactic.
And apparently, I think there's 3 or 4 seasons now. I didn't watch. I was done. I'm like, I can't do
Weird.
it.
I mean, if you want to watch a good HBO DC show, you watch Doom Patrol, because that's amazing.
I watched the first 2 seasons. It's great. I need to watch the last 2. I think there's 4 seasons right now.
Yep, they're 3.5. Like, half of the 4th one has come out, and then the other half will come out, I think, after summer.
Yeah, and that's going to be it for Doom Patrol because James Gunn's cutting everything. I will say that show. I have plans to continue watching that show because that show is great.
It is
Where,
really
where
good.
Teen Titans failed, Doom Patrol is excelling.
Oh yeah, definitely.
All right.
Teen Titans is just like kind of a cringy show in general. You want to watch like good Teen Titans like content. You watch the Young Justice animated, the first 2 seasons, nothing else.
Yep. But 3 and 4 is pretty good.
Really, I don't know.
I mean, it's
couldn't
bad.
get into it.
It's bad animation, but like story wise, it's serviceable.
It's all right. I think maybe it was just that like I was nostalgic about the way it was and frustrated that it was different.
That's fair. I will say the original Teen Titans is also a show that's worth watching, like the animated 2005 show.
Oh, of course, yeah. That
Before-
was sort of like before my time. I never had Cartoon Network,
Oh.
so I just didn't end up seeing it.
It's pretty good. It's better than Teen Titans Go. It's actually serious. It's not completely into DC. Like it's its own thing. Batman never shows up or anything like that, but it plays around with its characters. I like it. It's not as good as Young Justice, but it's up there. It's memorable.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there would have been a Young Justice without that show, so I think
Exactly.
it owes it a lot, probably.
As well as Teen Titans Go, which is a huge moneymaker with little kids.
Yeah.
Well,
you know,
it's not
good.
for me.
No. Well, I think there should be more content for younger kids. I mean, working at the comic book store, it was actually really hard to sell to that age group just because it was like, here's a Spider-Man comic, but I don't know if like somebody's head gets ripped off or not.
Yeah, that's it's definitely for more our age. All right,
Sure.
let's talk Nut.
I like the way you said that.
Let's talk about Nut. All right,
Heck yeah.
so you made a comic. You're
I
in
did.
the process of releasing 2 comics. Tell us about
Yes, sir. Yeah, so Nut is an old man with no agency in his life who is mute and destitute and just trying to sort of scrape by with his cat until he sort of rediscovers his past and learns about his future and also learns that he is a god that can do anything. So the first 3 issues sort of act as a prequel for the rest of the entire series,
Okay.
in which it will be like a completely different universe, if that makes sense.
it. Huh. I'm intrigued. So the first 3
Yeah.
issues, I only read the first one. The first 3 issues are kind of like mini stories, and then issue 4 will get into more of a main series. Or how do you plan on doing
Yeah.
that?
So it's a little weird because, like, the way in which it was made was really janky in that, like, when I was, like, a couple of years ago, when I was in school, it was like I had wanted to make a comic. I had never made one before. So I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I'll make, like, a 10-page zine. But then I liked that so much, I was like, okay, well, I found this printer. I want to do, like, an actual comic. So the first
Mhm.
issue ended up being like 2 mini stories put together in 1 issue, and you know, I think it was successful. It did way better than I thought it would, but in terms of like people understanding what I was trying to say, I both was trying to be too experimental and lacked the experience and skill to try and like convey my message to people. So, and like last summer I was sort of stuck with that, and I spent that summer reworking Nut and trying to come up with like how do I recontextualize the first issue to make like not only make the set make sense but also make something where I can go forward with this.
Mm-hmm.
So like in terms of sort of like the overall continuity, it's kind of messy, but once when the first 3 are done, it will all make sense, and then
Good.
it will go forward.
It's interesting enough where I'm definitely like, what does he have coming up next? Like, it is a very interesting idea. I know you explained to me the comic, so like when I read it, I very much understood what was happening. But I know my girlfriend when she read it, she's like, what's happening? Like, oh,
Yeah, I mean,
he's out of panels.
yeah.
He's meta now.
Yeah, I mean that was the general consensus. Like it was something where I feel like overall people got the general emotion, but
Yep.
they didn't understand the character as much, and they didn't know what to do with it, and it was really kind of embarrassing too. Like I sold a lot at the comic book store, but everybody knew I worked there, so these hordes of people would come up to me and be like, what is this? Why what does this mean? Why did you do this? And
Yeah.
I think with the second one, I'm trying to make it more of sort of a traditional narrative. Like I definitely think experimental stuff like has a place, and I'm not ashamed that I made it. But it's not like, if people don't know how to get away from it, or they don't end up thinking about it, then that kind of defeats the purpose,
Right.
I think.
So how does it make you feel as an artist? Because you know me, and the audience doesn't know this a whole lot. I've written a bunch of stories, but I've never had anything like published to the public. So how does that make you feel when you get that type of feedback where people don't quite understand the story the way you intended?
Yeah, well, I love the feedback. I think I was used to sort of the critique relationship at school, where it was like you would show this thing and then we would talk about it for a half hour.
Yeah.
But like when you're distributing it to a lot of different people, and that's not the preset sort of rules of engagement, then that's not really how that works anymore. And I think like I'm really interested in the relationship in which I'm inspired by things and then create things, and then like the viewer sees what I've created, and then it's not translated one to one, but like based on their world experience, they see it and draw their own conclusions and end up with something new, and then we both kind of end up different because of it. Like I'm really interested in that relationship, but I think there's an in between in which I can give enough information where they know more about where I'm coming from, rather than just being lost to the point at which they don't care anymore.
Yeah. So like having a story that's completely abstract, and then instead of having a story that's completely abstract where you have more of a guided focus with the story. So you have them think a certain way, but then give them a little bit more room to have their own interpretation, but in the range of guidelines where you want them to think.
Yeah, exactly. So like, for example, those pulp covers we were talking about, it's like, you get the vibe, not to sound like, too 21st century here. You get the vibe when you look at it, and you're inspired to think more about it. Like that's the point. It's not so confusing that you're lost as to what might happen here.
Right. Like a Picasso painting where it's like, hey, this gives up feelings and vibes, but the actual story, there's room for interpretation.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, so moving on then. Let's tell us what to expect for Nut 2. Obviously, don't tell us what the story is, because we have to read and buy the book, but tell us a little bit about what to expect.
Yeah, well, Nut 2 is a little bit of a course correct. It's like I was sort of explaining a little bit earlier, like it recontextualizes the series, and is much better at sort of like having room for interpretation, but also like being a little bit more friendly towards the reader. And this one is one single story, 36 pages. It's one story, and it explains what had happened. It has its own thing, and then it explains where we're going.
Nice.
So I think it's much more of a satisfying read this time around.
I am looking forward to it. I'm going to be one of the first people to buy it.
Amazing.
So I'm going to try to. We'll see.
It'll be in your box.
I'll be there right away at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday.
There you go.
All right. So so you talked a little bit about the plans for Nut in the future. So you're going to do the first 3. You already have 1 issue. Then the next 2 are going to be more independent stories, and then you're going to do a longer series. Are you going to start over with like a Nut the series, or are you going to go with Nut 4? What's kind of your plan?
Yeah, so there's a handful of different ways I could go, and I think so. The first 3 issues are what's called Birth of the Nutverse, and they act as the prequel for the series. So if the series takes place within the Nutverse, then they're going to be like, much less rooted in reality, if that makes sense. And I've always been interested in particularly serialized comics that are their own thing. Like they add to an overall story, but you can read it without being lost. And I think that's something that like mainstream comics in this day and age really kind of suffer from. So I think what I could do is I could just do smaller sort of single stories, or I might be interested in doing sort of like 100-page large comics or small graphic novels. Ideally, I'd like to get published like by something like Fantagraphics that does really good work. And it's more about like the cartoonists and what they're trying to say with their work, rather than fitting into any sort of like overall publishing theme or trying to make sort of like a lot of the comics coming out now I feel like are pitches to be movies. Like it's less about the
Yeah.
comic and more about like
Mhm.
how can this be a franchise, you know?
That makes sense. Yeah. Cool. 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 What are some
Yeah.
other projects you're working on? So you have Nut. What else are you working
Uh, not a whole lot. I mean, the point of the Nutverse is to sort of fit everything that I'm working into like one single universe that sort of all can exist and play together and add to each other. So I do work for it's this magazine in Canada called Spread Love Magazine, which is sort of like one of the only venues for underground cartoonists right now, and it's an anthology magazine where all these different people will contribute a handful of pages, and then this guy in Canada will just collect them into a book and distribute them himself.
Nice.
So I've been doing a handful of those, but even those fit into the Nutverse.
Nice.
Yeah, but in terms of like non-comic related work, I just like to sort of just like draw different surreal kind of things, or like I was talking about that yearbook, drawing out of that yearbook, which is really kind of, you know, it's like I don't have to think about it. It's just fun.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of thinking that comes with cartooning, whereas this is like just draw the thing. Like,
You're
don't
just
worry
drawing
about
what's
it.
on your mind.
Yeah,
No
exactly.
agency of where it goes, what you're doing with it, just drawing the
Yeah.
draw.
I think
Nice.
it's important to have fun with it. I mean, that's the whole point.
All right, let's get into you a little bit. How do you get into drawing? Where did your love for drawing come from?
Yeah, well, I have a weird relationship with drawing. I feel like I was always into art. Like even at a young age, like really young age, I was making things out of cardboard or like making things out of clay, and I liked to do my own thing. And like I think in kindergarten, I garnered some attention because I would make these. I didn't know what comics were at the time, but I was making these like picture books that were sort of like these flip books that I'd staple together with words and pictures, which was essentially a comic book. But you know, at one point or another, I sort of gave it up because it's like, you know, somebody in the class can draw better than you. Oh well, I can't compete with that guy. I'm not the artist. Like I'll
Yeah.
figure something else out to do. And it was like that for quite a long time until I saw this. I saw this Todd McFarlane documentary. He's the guy who made Spawn and is famous for working on Spider-Man.
Started Image Comics, right?
Yeah, yep, one of the guys that started Image Comics, and he had talked about how, you know, like me, he was a fan, and like me, he worked at a comic book store, and he just really liked the stuff, and he just, you know, worked at drawing for years and years, and then started doing his own stuff. And I'm like, oh, it's not like something you're born with. It's like elbow grease. Like I can do that, and which, you know, might be a little bit ignorant, but I didn't have too much else going for me, so I really kind of latched onto this thing, and just like, you know, I would buy these like anatomy drawing books and just like draw constantly. And you know, I started with stick figures, and that wasn't that long ago. I was only 18, and that was really only 4 or 5 years ago for me. So I just would draw like 8 hours a day for a long time until I learned how to do it. And as I, you know, went to art school and started doing my own stuff, I really started to appreciate like underground comics and alternative and experimental comics, and moved away a little bit from the superhero stuff and more into like fine art kind of venues. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a really cool story.
thank you.
So, what are some of the favorite or your favorite things to work on? I know you talked about it a little bit. You have the Nutverse going on for you. Like, if you had, like, let's say you had to pick one thing to work on, and it'd be your one thing to work on for the rest of your life, what would you work on?
Oh man, I mean that's hard. It's like I feel like, and I'm certainly a person that suffers from like wanting what they can't have, because I live in this like idyllic, like I've never been this happy. Like there's nothing I have to complain about really. But now that I'm not working at the comic book store, I'm like, man, like I want that. Like that was so much fun, and like doing mindless labor. Like wow, give me some of that. To the point at which when I visited St. Cloud a couple weeks ago, I ended up working like unannounced for 5 hours or something like that, and I was
You
so
gotta stop
excited.
doing that.
I was so excited. I had a dream about it the night before that I
Oh,
was
really?
back working. So I think anything like if you have too much of it can be a little bit toxic to you. So I like to have like a lot of different things I'm working on, like my business, for example, or different things that take place within the Nutverse but are different in their own right. But I guess if to answer your question, if I was to do like, do you mean like one type of art or like one
Yeah,
project?
one type of art. Please don't tell me
Uh,
mindless labor at the comic book store.
I just want to lift boxes, man. Like, come on. No, yeah, it's got to be comics for me. It really does, because I mean, it is one thing, but there's so much freedom. It's like, there's the story you're trying to tell, and there's how you're going to communicate it. And, when I was younger and getting into it, I suffered from like, people who draw in a cartoony style, whatever that means, only do it because they can't draw things realistic, and it would be better if it was realistic. But that's just not true, like, at all.
Yeah.
Like, comics are the way they are because that's the best way to communicate it, and there's a lot of different freedom within that. Like, you pick up something from like Todd McFarlane, it looks way different, but that's a superhero comic, and that's a
Yep.
really good superhero comic. But you pick up something from, say, Chris Ware or Gary Panter, and it's like, that would never be Spider-Man, but that's the best version of what those guys are doing, and you could never imagine it any way different, right? And I just love that about it.
I always liked picking up different artists when they switch up like the different artists for superheroes, and just seeing how much different it is.
Yeah.
The biggest example, because like Batman is drawn a certain way, but then you have when Jeff Lemire and Dustin, I can't think of his name, Nguyen.
Oh, yeah, he was the guy that worked on Sender, right?
Yep. And then they did Batman and Robin, and then he has a very like watercolor like style to his drawings, and just seeing his version of Batman and Robin, which is very similar to Ascender Descender, it was really cool to see.
Oh yeah, well, and I think one thing people don't realize with comics, or people who aren't familiar with the medium, is it's like, it's the pictures aren't there because, like, I'm trying to format what I'm saying. Some people are under the assumption that the pictures are there to assist the words, or to always like explain what the words are already saying. So like you read the words, and they say the same thing as when you're reading the picture, but that's not always the case. It's like they're two different narratives happening.
Yep.
The pictures and the words in those narratives can be parallel, but they can also be intersecting. They can be completely different, and it's about how the reader absorbs those two different narratives and draws relations between them and comes to a new conclusion, right? And comics are one of the only things that does that.
It gives you two different sources of information. It could be saying the same different thing, or it can give you different points of information that lead to the same conclusion, but you have to get both the picture and the words to get there. You can't just do one or the other.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the best examples of that in terms of like superhero comics is probably Arkham Asylum by Grant Morrison and Dave McKean. I don't know if you ever ended up reading that.
I don't think I have. I remember
No.
you mentioning it, but I haven't read it.
Yeah, you definitely need to, because it's like the two different narratives would sort of coincide so beautifully, where it was like the words were one completely different thing from the pictures, but they came together in ways where you knew what was happening, but they came apart in ways that you had sort of like two eyes in different rooms, right? And you like you got three stories in one, where it was like, this is what the words were saying, this is what the pictures were saying, and then this is what they meant together. If that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. It reminds me of Tom King. 'Cause Tom King does that a lot, where he'll have
He's a good
like
one too.
he'll have like a narrative going on in like a little box format where somebody's like telling a story, but it's not what's being represented on the page, and then the page doesn't really is either limited in its words, or it's telling a visual story, and you have two stories that are very parallel to each other. They thematically fit, but they're two different stories completely.
Yeah, exactly. Tom King, I love him for that exact reason.
So, all right, my next couple of questions. Let's just talk comics now.
Sure, yeah. I love to do that.
I love hearing your take on like what artists are great. So my next question is, What famous artists should my listeners look for? Either if it's current, then maybe not famous artists, but artists that you enjoy now and artists that in the past. Who should they look out for on the name of the covers?
Yeah, well, man, I'm always a little spastic when it comes to like things I'm looking for. I'm like, this looks cool. I need to read this, and I need to read this, and like it doesn't always make a whole lot of sense. But I've been really enjoying Alex Graham. She's a painter and cartoonist from Seattle, working in with Fantagraphics for more alternative type work, and
Nice.
she just came out with a graphic novel collection of her digital webcomic called Dog Biscuits,
Yeah.
which is really, really interesting. It actually was on the LA Times top 100 of the year, and it's sort of like about this group of people who are trying to survive during COVID in Seattle and sort of work against police brutality and just living their lives. And it sounds like sort of like, well, I lived that. I don't want to interact with it, but it just tells it in such an interesting way, and the characters are just so interesting.
I just brought it up. The cover looks fascinating. A dog. Yeah, I really like the cover.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and like the main characters are like these sort of like anamorphic characters,
Mm-hmm.
but that has nothing to do like with the story whatsoever. It's more just a vehicle of like telling who's who, and most everybody else in the story is regular people except for like these five like random dudes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Who else? Who else is a good artist for people to look at? Maybe more like mainstream. So a lot of the audience, I feel like if they go to the comic book store, they're thinking superheroes, Marvel, DC,
Sure.
maybe Image.
Yeah, yeah. I think, and even this isn't really mainstream, but I think my favorite mainstream thing is probably, I mentioned it with the TV show, but Doom Patrol. Like they're actually gonna start up a new series, in I think in a couple months, and like if you ever read like the Grant Morrison Doom Patrol series from the mid or late '80s, like that's just amazing, and it was what he was doing was he was trying to take a fine art mentality and put it into comic books,
Mm-hmm.
like in mainstream comic books. So, like Dadaism, for example, is an art movement, and he was trying to insert that, or like surrealism, for example. So those are really fascinating. Or even like the Silver Age Doom Patrol. It's a similar thing where it's like I was talking about these pulp covers. They would just have these characters that would be like stuff you would never see otherwise, like interacting with these sort of misfit characters. I mean, it's like X-Men, but not as I don't want to say it's like X-Men, but it's sort of like archetypal superhero characters, but they're
Yeah.
nightmarish.
Doom Patrol is very good for that.
Oh
I
yeah.
do when I either watching the TV show or seeing Doom Patrol in other mediums. I do enjoy Doom Patrol for that reason. It's very
Oh yeah.
how they're like heroes, but they're really not. It's kind of like the bad part of if you were to get powers through traumatic circumstances, but they
Yeah.
also tend to be heroes in their own right.
Yeah, well, it's like they're just people, and I think that was what was so interesting too about like the sort of boom of monster and horror movies in America from the 1950s. Like I've been working through those, and I saw The Shrinking Man. Like that's an amazing story. It's just this guy, and you feel so bad for him
Mm-hmm.
because you can relate to him on that level. And I'm certainly not against superhero narratives whatsoever. Like Superman's one of my favorite characters, but I think with like there's just so many of them. With a lot of them it doesn't make sense that they're fighting crime. Like why are you like you are this way, and why do you choose to do this?
Yeah, superheroes don't really work in like when you think about like modern world. It's like a superhero wouldn't make sense because there's not a whole lot of crime to fight, and if it is, it's very small scale. There's not like supervillains like coming around.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and man, I don't know, I feel like Doom Patrol is sort of like the Ren and Stimpy of like mainstream. And
I like
what
that.
I
Yeah,
mean by that is it's like it's just like nightmarish and sort of parades around as something that it's really not. Does that make sense?
yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
So I have a few artists that I enjoy. Fiona Staples for Saga, freaking
Oh yeah.
amazing.
She's wonderful.
Yep.
I really need to read Saga. I've never
I
read
think
it.
you'd enjoy it. That's one of the books I definitely recommend for most people. The way I've had it described before I started it is Star Wars and Game of Thrones meets together. Basically, in terms of you have all these wonderful, well drawn, well written characters, and yeah, they die. They, life
There you
moves
go.
on. It's very Walking Dead in the point where like you have these great group of characters. You have this dangerous world where you lose these characters, but like you gain characters as you lose characters, and you just have this circle of wonderful characters that you grow and love, and then you're devastated when they're taken away.
Yeah. Well, those are always. I don't know. It's cool when a story has like the balls to do that.
Yeah,
I think it can be really interesting.
and then you make them into TV shows and it becomes a gimmick. Who's gonna die this week? Yeah, that's a shot at
That
Walking
certainly
Dead.
happens.
Goddamn Walking Dead season 6 finale, I believe.
Is that
Who's
still
gonna
going?
die?
I thought
no,
it was over.
They ended it. Season
Oh,
11,
okay.
they finally ended it. They caught up to the comic book, and I didn't watch it. I tried rewatching it, I couldn't do it.
Oh,
Couldn't do it. All right,
man.
I have two more questions for you. Then we can end. What comics do you love now? What's on your pull list? You said Doom Patrol.
Yeah, definitely. Doom Patrol. I like in terms of mainstream stuff. I really love Mark Waid's World's Finest right now. Like
okay.
it's sort of I think is bringing back something that's been missing with comics, where it's sort of like a little bit more, not necessarily lighthearted. Like there's messed up stuff that happens in it, but it's like
Yeah.
more episodic, and I feel like I don't know, like it just makes more sense. Like it's not they're not writing for a trade paperback, they're writing for the single issue,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
they're doing things that I feel like hasn't really been done before. I don't know if they're continuing with World's Finest, but they're going to be doing Shazam together in sometime in summer, I think.
Oh, okay, I might have to pick that up. I've been
Yeah.
enjoying Shazam lately. Just watched a new movie. It's kind of meh, but
Kind of meh. Yeah, I love the character. The movies are kind of meh, but if you want to see like good, if you want to see good Shazam TV, you just watch that like 20 minutes DC Showcase special that they did like in 2010. That's the best Shazam has ever been on TV.
okay. I also like Shazam and Young Justice season 1 too.
Oh yeah, that was amazing too. And that whole thing with Batman talking when they were debating whether or not he should stay in the Justice League.
Mm-hmm.
That was amazing. It's just an amazing show. Oh, Dan Mora is the guy that illustrates World Finest, and that is going to Shazam with Mark Waid, and he's really good too.
Mark Waid's pretty good. I'm like hit and miss on Mark Waid. He doesn't excite me as a writer, but I'm also not like if Mark Waid takes over, I'm like, oh god, I'm not gonna look. There's certain writers. There's one writer where if he takes over, he's a DC writer. He's a Minnesota based. I don't want to hate on him too much. He's a really nice dude. I met him,
I know who you're talking about, and I agree.
but his writing is sometimes it's Minnesota food. It's bland. It's Midwest. It's meat and potatoes.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot going on.
But I did
with
like
those all the
Mark
time.
Waid's, I believe his Flash run. Was it his Flash run? There was one run that I read from him that I have as a trade that I absolutely love. I think it might be
Yeah.
Flash.
I think he worked on Flash, and I think he also worked on Impulse. But I feel like Mark Waid's a person where, like, you definitely know when he's enjoying something
Yeah.
that he's working on. Like, yeah, like I think he's been writing comics for a really, really long time, and I'm sure he relies on the work he gets. So, like something like Captain America that he's written, I feel is really like, oh, well, you probably did this because you needed work. But like something like Kingdom Come, for example, that he worked on, like wow, you really cared about like this has the work in it, and this has the emotion in it.
And it's like the downside of being like a long-time writer. You're kind of, especially for like Marvel and DC, you're pushed to do stories. You're like, I need the money. It's my livelihood, but it's not something I'm passionate about. It's not a passion project.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, and Chris Ware talked about that. Somebody was interviewing him, asking him how he felt about like breaking in and finally being like a full-time artist, and he's like, well, it's good and bad because now I rely on it. Like I can't be as experimental. I can't always work on what I want to work on as much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I have the benefit of just doing what I want all the time, artistically speaking,
Yeah,
but not everybody does.
that's fair. All right, one last question.
Sure.
When the fuck are we gonna collab, man?
Well, you know, maybe 2050, one of these years.
20. I gotta wait 22. Wait, no,
You know,
27 years. Dang. Your book's solid. Good for you.
no, one of these days, I feel bad. I swear, I think about that on like a weekly basis at least, where it's like,
I hope you don't think
oh
that
no.
much about it.
No,
Every time you see my name, you're just like, oh man, I said I'd do a comic for him once.
no, I know. I feel bad. Well, one of these days, I'll do that. But I
I'll
don't
just
know.
pitch you
Working
things.
with people is
I'll just pitch you things weekly, and you just tell me if you like it. I haven't
there.
been.
You go.
I haven't been writing a whole lot,
Sure.
so I guess I can't hound you too much.
I don't know. I feel like I don't know. It's one of those things where I've never really worked on somebody with a comic before, so it's just something that isn't necessarily always my go-to.
Yeah.
And like I've definitely never worked from a script before. Like how I do Nut, I'll do like layouts on my iPad.
Mhm.
Like I'll have a synopsis and I'll do layouts, but the dialogue is the thing that I do last completely.
Yeah.
So I'm not used to like a dialogue-driven thing. But one day it will happen.
Well, if you want it to happen, I'm here for you. I can do it completely new.
Yeah, I'll probably. I know you've sent me stuff, and I'll probably look at that stuff at some point and just send you something out of the blue. Hey, I did these pages based on this thing.
That'd be cool. I'd be so excited if you were to send me just randomly, like, hey, I actually worked on this. I'd be like, what? What? I want to see it. Even if you do any more work on it, I like seeing when my art or when my stories finally come into like an art form.
Yeah, man. Well, you know, now that you've brought it up, though, it has to be even more unexpected. So forget 2050. It's going to be 2060. Gotta wait another
Dude,
10
I don't
years.
even know if I'm gonna be alive then. Wait, 20.
I'll just bury it next to you.
I'm gonna be like in the retirement home, and you're just gonna, hey, Jake, I finally did your comic. And I'm like, I could die.
You'll be like, who the fuck are you? What? I don't remember any of this.
All right. Well, anything else you want to cover before we hit the unrecord button?
No, man. This has been great. This has been a lot of fun. It's nice to see a familiar face, especially since I've moved.
I bet from seeing a bunch of familiar faces to being in, completely new city.
Oh yeah. Well, even the comic book store. It was like such a community to
Mhm.
and school to lose those kind of at the same time was a bit of a shock for me.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Before we go though, Nut 2. When is it coming out? Let the audience know.
Yeah, it's coming out April 5th on my website, row7.squarespace.com, as well as at Granite City Comics and Games. I'm working on getting a line of distribution in the Twin Cities, so it might be available later than that date in different stores in the Twin Cities, but you can get it April 5th at Granite City Comics and at the Row 7 website.
Nice. And what else? We're missing one more big thing.
Oh, yes, I will be at Granite City Comics April 8th
And that's
from
in
10 to
St.
6.
Cloud, Minnesota.
Signing.
St.
Yes,
Cloud,
St. Cloud,
Minnesota.
Minnesota.
So yeah, you can
Did I
find
miss
Brandon
anything
John
else?
April 8th. Granite City Comics signing all Nut 2 issues.
Heck yeah, and you know, I'm more excited to vacuum the store than I am to sign copies because it needs to be vacuumed.
Are they gonna make you work? They're gonna make you work?
They don't have to make me. I have fun. they'll pay me if that's what you're asking. I'll
I
get paid.
freaking hope
to
that you
cover.
get paid for doing it.
It's
All
all
right.
good. We're all friends.
Well, this was Brandon John. This is your host, Jake Sherbing. This is Don't Involve Me. Thank you for listening. And yes, go check out and buy Nut 2 as well as Nut 1. Is that still in comics? Is that still in stores?
Well, you can get a handful of them from me, but I wasn't able to afford to do a second print of number 1. However, I'm working on getting it just for free on my Instagram as like a PDF, just so people can read it if they want to. So if you need it from me, you can get it one way or another.
All right.
But yeah, follow me on Instagram, Brandon of John. I got cool stuff there.
Yes. Follow the Instagram pages. Brandon F. John, right?
Of John.
Brandon of
Sort of
John
like-
on Instagram.
Yeah. Sort of like the
Actually-
dumb thing where they used to do like Carl, son of Thomas. You know, I don't know. It's a dumb joke. Doesn't make a lot of sense.
Alright. Well, this is it. This is Brandon John. This is Don't Involve Me. This is Jake Sherbing. We are out. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you.